so much, Doctor, for joining us today. Feel free to begin.
First of all, I want to thank Shruti, Jeanette, and the Sovereign Health Group for inviting me to speak. And for all of you that have shown up today, I appreciate you spending some time to listen to a new field. And Shruti said, my name is Dr. Cohen, and as a doctoral degree prepared researcher, my focus for the past 17 years has been to develop a collaborative approach to art therapy using both theory and practice in the use of filmmaking as part of therapy. So my degree is in clinical psychology with an emphasis on depth, and I feel that the key to all of this is collaboration. And because a large part of what makes the film work as well. And as a part of film and video-based therapy, since we're making movies with clients, it also draws from several disciplines, from expressive therapy, narrative therapy, art therapy, digital storytelling, phototherapy, and they all require a collaboration to integrate the many dynamics of both art and medicine. This group was then created to help establish a collaborative effort in forming film and video-based therapy. So this forum is about making films with clients as opposed to cinema therapy, which is about watching films, and storytelling, which is an indigenous and ancient way for people to relate to one another and to understand the mysteries of life. So using modern technology, specifically video and filmmaking, artists have used film and video for expressing ancient and modern images and sounds. Film language, although through editing, was only recently introduced into our history. And cinema therapy has also been gaining popularity. And recently it has ignited a new interest in the use of film outside of the arts. And this presentation also goes beyond cinema therapy by allowing artists and therapists to nurture their creativity by collaborating and making movies. And this presentation, psychologists, therapists, art therapists, anthropologists, and any artists or scientists interested in the healing power of art might be interested. And for more information, you can visit the website that we'll be providing later on. Now, the book was actually published in the National Library of Medicine in over 60 countries, and now we are forming a digital storytelling project to kind of continue this research. And it is also being taught it's being taught at USC in their social work department, and is continuing to be cited throughout different forms of literature. Now, the purpose of this presentation is just to introduce film and video-based therapy and suggest further thought. But we also want to share how this relates to trauma, grief, and loss, and to provide both, phenomenological as well as evidence-based research that shows how this can be empirically validated and then practically used in our purposes for therapy. So as I said, it combines a lot of the various different forms of disciplines, which makes it difficult to coordinate. And this is the working definition that we are currently trying to reconcile with the field. Another part of film and video-based therapy that we're looking into in the future, of course, is collaborating with virtual reality. As you can see, virtual reality also involves a lot of exposure therapy, and since it is a new field, it creates a more practical outcome and focus for this kind of narrative. There's a research being done at USC for their advancements with virtual reality with PTSD, similar to what we've done with narrative therapy in the book, which we will cover later, with Benjamin Patton's work with the Army and his work on Army bases. So applying this to the field of trauma, in the field of both the field of neuroscience and somatic psychology have demonstrated that trauma is embodied mostly with physiological states. In other words, it focuses, in my experience as a clinician and working in hospitals and private practice, I've shown that a great deal of trauma is focused on dysregulation. A great deal of addiction comes from dysregulation. So people that are not regulated in their bodies do not use, and that have had severe trauma usually form addictions. And of course, there's a lot of research behind the neuroscience of addiction that can back up why it happened. So if we're going to use a treatment like virtual reality, for instance, I'm going to welcome you to all take a look at these websites where certain applications will allow you to regulate that nervous system. So in this particular example, I talked to a developer of this app that worked with yoga, and his approach is very similar to what Bessel van der Kolk and Peter Levine talk about as far as the body keeping the score. So the practical outcome is that you put on a headset with your client and you can sit them down and regulate the nervous system. Now, I wouldn't want to work with a client if they were high or unable to focus in a room. The same with a traumatized patient, you would want them to be relaxed and in a state where they can actually access the language portion of their brain. This could be used very practically, and if you want to see how this is done, we can actually do some demonstrations later on. I do this through my business, and I'd be happy to help get people in touch with the headsets. Right now they're currently selling this app is available through the App Store and Google Play, and you can use it through the Gear VR on Samsung. But I'm also personally selling these headsets so anyone with an iPhone can use them as well. Now, the research that goes with this from the book is both qualitative and quantitative in nature. The first one is from Carolyn McGurl, and Elizabeth Hamilton, on a panel that they put together for this particular book. Now, Carolyn is graduated from Messier College, where she studied psychology and minored in counseling with children and youth services, and she moved from New York to Oregon to pursue doctoral studies in clinical psychology at George Fox University. And she completed her dissertation with the help of grief and loss for children and adolescents using a unique technological approach. And finishing her doctoral internship. She finished her doctoral internship and is now currently licensed. Elizabeth Hamilton earned her PhD in clinical psychology from UCLA, and after completing her MS at Tulane University and her BA at Vanderbilt, she's a previous co-recipient of a school-based intervention grant award by the American Psychological Association, Division 53, and she's currently the director of the school-based behavioral health in a graduate department of clinical psychology at George Fox University, and is involved in ongoing research on optimizing the delivery of psychological services to youth in rural school districts. In addition to clinical training and graduate teaching, she maintains an active clinical practice specialized in child and adolescent issues and mood disorders across her lifespan. Due to time, I can't get into all the different researchers involved, but these were the main ones that we presented with. They present this at the American Psychological Association in Toronto. The main study tools that they used were the Children's Hope Scale and overall agency and pathways. The point of the intervention was that hope and resilience, or a sense of mastery and relatedness, would significantly increase during this videotaped confessional. So the confessional was set up as a sort of a glass mirror where it would demonstrate itself as a tool showing how these members the participants would show grief and loss. And so they used a one-tailed pair t-test, and they found the overall hope and safety increase during the participation in the program with very much statistical significance. And then also resilience using a one-tailed pair t-test they found that the children's sense of mastery increased. So what we're showing here, and the qualitative and quantitative research both show this, that hope wasn't enough. It was also the sense of mastery. And that sense of ownership, the ability to say, I have the ability to do something. That's what this technological intervention provides. So when we go into other research, and this is the qualitative research where I'm going to introduce Lauren's work from the book, is it's basically that. It's a lived experience providing hope and mastery. And Dr. Johnson is also a filmmaker, a psychologist, and founder of the Therapeutic Filmmaking Institute. So after she obtained a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Film and Video Production at York University, she received a Master of Science in Applied Psychology and a Doctor of Philosophy at the University of Alberta in Counseling Psychology. She worked in private practice, specializing in working with women and members of the First Nations in Calgary, Alberta. So she did a pilot study back in 2008 about the mechanisms of change, and again, they found mastery changed with her research on therapeutic filmmaking, very similar to Carolyn and Elizabeth and the other authors involved in their quantitative research. So we can see that both kinds of research can be very valuable and complementing each other. And The experience of therapy was about focusing. Film was a catalyst for discussion. So these are all very valuable ways of validating for the American Psychological Association and the larger community that this is valid research that could show progress with digital intervention. Another form of research and practice that we worked with was in the field of trauma was through a process called digital storytelling. And digital storytelling is a way of telling stories with a narrative that can, in this case, allow for a certain amount of processing to take place. So let me introduce Kim Anderson, since she's an associate professor in the School of Social Work at the University of Missouri, Columbia. And she teaches, well, actually now she's in Florida, where she teaches clinical practice and evaluation at the graduate level. And in her book, Enhancing Resilience in the Survivors of Family Violence, her scholarship bridges the gap between theory and practice by offering conceptual frameworks that capture the interplay of trauma and resilience for survivors of family violence. And she co-authored this with Beatrice Wallace, who was a visiting professor in the School of Journalism and Multimedia Arts at Duquesne University in Pittsburgh. So a lot of these, a great deal of what Kim's research has to do with is being able to tell a story and ask the children to just speak or plainly write about their trauma. And then so many people need to find another avenue of expression. So to discover their voice, it provides this alternative for them to be seen and heard. And digital storytelling, well, in this case they use a movie maker or iPad. These applications are very easily accessible, and they provide a mixture of images and text and narration as a way of giving a voice to these traumatized individuals. The very end result is they get a 2 to 5 minute film of one's own trauma narrative. So this is what it might look like. You start out with who, what, when, where, what emotions did I feel. You know, it can be a very structured script. Some populations don't appreciate having it left so wide open, and they're not natural storytellers, so this might be helpful. And then they would add pictures, words, and voice, and then music. So her research involves a PTSD checklist. They did a 17-item instrument that assesses PTSD symptoms, including subscales of experience, avoidance, and arousal. Cutoff score is 44 in the mood and feelings questionnaire child question. They found this was an 11-item instrument that measures depression. Then they also did the Harris Self-Esteem Scale, which was a 30-item instrument that measures the youth's overall esteem and subscales relating to the peers' home and the school. And the norm average range was 99, a standard deviation of 6.2. No clinical cutoff score, and the clinical degree difference pre and post treatment was 10 points. So Youth Coping Index was also a 31-item scale designed to address psychosocial and spiritual coping displayed in the last month. Now the norm average for the Youth Coping Index is 94, the standard deviation of 5.6. And no clinical cutoff score, and the clinical significance differences with pre and post test treatment was about 10 points. So this is again more quantitative data to add to the pile. So PTSD symptoms then decreased by an average of 12 points. The mean was 42.33, and the clinical cutoff score was greater than 44 for 100% of the sample. Now the 14 youth who exhibited depression at pre-treatment, they decreased in depression scores by 7 points at the post-treatment, and the clinical cutoff score is greater than 8. 11 increased in self-esteem by an average of 17 points. Of the 4 do not show significant increases in self-esteem at pre-treatment. They were already at the average of 99. So 13 increases coped by an average of 10 points, and of the 3 who did not show significant increases in coping at pre-treatment, they were already at an average of 94. So the thematic analysis is the identity. Bottom line, they felt like they got themselves back. Being seen and heard is a good thing. Then again, mastery. These people are mastering a skill. It isn't just hopeful thinking. And there's a sense of relatedness. They got along better with their mom. They felt like they were communicating. So this is also very important to their process. Finally, we're getting into something that a lot of filmmakers find is very crucial to the filmmaking process. And I'm going to relate this to addictions later on and how this can also regulate the nervous system. So therapy and editing are a process. And remember, storytelling is an ancient art form. It goes well beyond, I mean, thousands of years old. So editing is just a new way of telling old stories. It has been used to explore the innermost dimensions of the psyche. In order to inspire and nurture the soul of the filmmaker, it continues to fascinate therapists and clients because it's a modality for capturing that visual representation and the personal dreams and myths that reflect our culture's collective unconscious. Now, film is a distinct medium and dramatic so that a catharsis or a purification can be reached. That's what the Greeks used to say when they were, when they originally did their dramas. Film also engages people in a seductive dance with the dramatic, so that catharsis, which really means to purge or to vomit, according to Aristotle, in the Greek sense, can be reached. So in essence, the goal is to find a balance among desire, pleasure, discipline, and focus on a receptacle that can hold that passion. And film is a natural process for this. In editing, you decide what comes first. The client decides what will be first, and then they will receive, less screen time. In my case, I have an example. I will attach this if you guys would like to see this. Shruti will be sending clips at the end. There's an 11-year-old boy. His presenting problem was that he was involved in a custody battle. He's being corporally punished by his father, but the father refused to admit to the behavior publicly. So of course the boy is angry. His father was, in his mind, was abusing him, and that was the alleged punishment. So where the father's physical abuse left no marks, and it did not meet other requirements for legal abuse with the government, so the case was eventually closed. But the boy's psychological state was that he was still being treated for anger. And he was doing a lot of work with art. At the time, he was drawing a lot of volcanoes and images of anger. So we worked with him using art therapy and projective testing and other methods of diagnosis and treatment in order to help him. So we decided to try something different. We decided to use storytelling and use a green backdrop to allow him to do work in front of the green screen and tell a story. So via play therapy, by Oaklander's work, we actually allowed this boy to get in touch with, or allowed him to have a space to hopefully get in touch with the sadness, not just the anger, but sort of an acceptance of the situation. So that was, and that is a good background to, very hard to kind of segue back into this particular section next, but I want to introduce Benjamin Patton's work. Ben is a filmmaker, of course, and he was the founder and president of Patton's Veterans Project. It's a not-for-profit organization devoted to serving veterans and military families coping with the consequences of post-traumatic stress. He oversees the operations for and leads his I Was There therapeutic film workshop, reaching out to veterans participants before, during, and after participation. And he's the youngest grandson of World War II General George S. Patton Jr. Ben is the co-author of the 12th book, Growing Up Patton, Reflections on Heroes, History, and Family Wisdom, and formerly producer for and development executive. He also operates Patton Productions, an independent production company. He's also the graduate of Georgetown University and holds a master's in developmental psychology. Working with him was a clinical psychologist, Dr. Rivka Tibal-Mashiach. She's a clinical psychologist, senior lecturer in the Department of Psychology at Bar-Ilan University in Israel. She's also the head of Community Services Unit at the Israel Center for Terror, Victims of Terror and War. Her research and clinical work include narrative approaches to diagnose and treat people exposed to trauma and those with PTSD. She studied collective trauma, gender and trauma, and identity construction processes following traumatic events, and has published extensively on these topics. The United States currently has 2 million active duty and reserve military personnel that are nearly 22 million living veterans. There are over 80 million direct family members of active duty personnel and veterans. 2.7 million troops have served or are serving in the 21st century conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan. As an estimated 1.4 veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan conflict suffer from post-traumatic stress. These symptoms affect themselves and their family members. So the United States has 2.2 million active duty veterans, and here are some of the sources of their work. The combat exposure results in high levels of post-traumatic stress. They also call it post-traumatic stress during their workshops because a lot of the troops do not want to have it called, do not want to even identify with the word disorder. So as a result, about 50% of veterans with PTSD or depression do not seek care. I've actually seen patients with addictions that have post-traumatic stress that would, personally, I would say that they would have been very much helped by a program like this had it been in place at the time. They also host multi-day filmmaking workshops. They go on to military bases and qualified facilities as a therapeutic intervention for veterans and military families coping with service-related stress. And the process combines the value of narrative construction with the power of digital media. They have three principles, basically: listening, collaboration, and empowerment. The listening affirms and validates their soldiers' stories. The collaboration, veterans working together towards a common objective, and the empowerment, the participants control the entire process. And why it works is because they're being listened to, and the participants are less lonely, and the informal setting helps reluctant veterans to engage better. Filmmaking also enables complete flexibility, both content and process. Also, movie making is fun. So they have a sample that Ben's allowed us to show. Again, it will be, Shruti and I will share this at the end. It does have graphic content and language, so we like to say in digital storytelling, there's a trigger warning, so if you do see this, be aware it is a combat-related footage as well as severe language. So in the next step, they do continue with the workshops and add a control group. They incorporate the program to a broader framework of recovery, and they train others to conduct the I Was There film workshops and broaden this program to non-military populations so that they have experienced, that have also experienced trauma. So they also create a film archive for the general public to raise awareness of the challenges, which you can also see on their YouTube site. And if you want to see more, you can also visit them at I Was There Films. So finally, I wanted to introduce one of the other editors of the book, and her work is extremely valuable. Her name is Penny Orr. Penny has been doing some great work with art therapy. She's a board-certified registered art therapist and board-credentialed supervisor. And Dr. Orr served on Art Therapy Credentials Board, which credentialed art therapists in the United States, which credentials art therapists in the United States, and was the past president of this board. She's taught at Edinburgh University and Florida State University for the past 10 years, in which she published one book, wrote chapters for 2 edited books, and published 15 articles on digital media theory and use in art therapy. I've also introduced myself. But and Lauren and I also felt very strongly about an ethical piece into this book. We wanted to talk about ownership. We wanted to introduce the fact that this is a very complicated issue in the field of research and practice, because we're dealing with media, and media can be very, well, it's considered a mass media, film is. It means that they are intended for mass distribution and consumption. So clients may already have this association with film, and they may not carefully consider the implications of public viewing. However, the art is owned by the client, so not all art therapists can inform and advise on potential implications of what might happen if they were to be distributed. While at the same time, there is a strong movement to share stories about mental illness in order to demystify it for the general public, and can sometimes be considered healing in the public of telling one's story. So this traditional public display of film provides both potential as well as healing as well as potential harm. So those are some of the benefits and limitations. Lynn Capitan was also speaking about the ethical aspirations at the American Therapy Conference of the ethics document, stating that as a group we need to also have something called core principles. And she pointed, for examples, to the American Psychological Association in 2011, for example, has 5 such principles in addition to specific standards of conduct. So that the commitment is to, first of all, do no harm. fidelity and responsibility, which advance trust and accountability in professional relationships, integrity, by which professionals agree to be truthful, honest, and accurate in their interactions, and justice to ensure accessible, equitable treatment, and human rights and dignity, which is the principle and guides conduct surrounding privacy, confidentiality, and self-determination. Core principles are a statement of belief that are at the foundation of our ethical reasoning. And when it comes to using films in therapy as they are, here we go. So, well, when making films with clients, the storyteller's physical, psychological, and social well-being come first. The process of making the film is as important to the product, so that the well-being of the storyteller should be monitored throughout. And they should also make informed choices. The storyteller must be able to make informed choices about the content, production, and use of their product. They have the right to withdraw public viewing even after they have given their consent. They must be aware of the limitations of placing artwork in the public eye. To begin with, they may not be able to completely remove the item from public access. And of course, the ownership, the client who is a storyteller has the right to represent themselves, even in a minor, with guardian consent. They own to make decisions about the form and presentation of the work. There are benefits and risks of the process. While working in the film, the client is constantly going on a dialogue between the storyteller and what the therapist, and that the therapist, which this dialogue should exist. The dialogue should be about consent, ownership, representation, and other decisions that may impact the client, rather than simply just relying on consent. So the field of art therapy has many of these in place with their code of professional practice, addressing some of these core principles. So without going into too much of the ethics piece, we want to go into a little bit further. Let's go to where this would be used in practice. So we've covered the qualitative and quantitative goals. We covered a little bit about the clinical goals, and a little bit with the apps and how this works with virtual reality, some of the practical goals. So the educational goal, again, would be to teach this like we are doing today, get the word out that this isn't a valid approach. Virtual reality in particular is up and coming and needs more guidelines, I believe, in the educational as well as ethical boundaries. And also, the forefront of digital storytelling may be headed in that direction. Another point of reference that I wanted to bring up as a resource is HIPAA compliance. In the digital age, this presents a unique challenge for people doing digital storytelling. So one of the approaches I found is to collaborate with certain companies that are willing to protect their digital files. So if you'd like to learn a little bit more about one of those companies, you can visit the following video, which Shuki, I believe, will have for us at the end. If not, you can always contact me, and we'll learn, and we'll be able to connect you with those links as well. So without further ado, I'm going to bring in a video that's going to introduce a guest speaker to talk a little bit about how trauma and editing can also be, how working with editing can also be healing in the treatment of trauma, which, as we said, is very much at the core of all addictions. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce editor and supervising editor and editing coach Paul Petchak. He's on the faculty of the University of Southern California, and he's a somatic experiencing practitioner. So here is a video that we did a while back. I guess I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask you to talk maybe a little bit about some of your favorite work, things that you really enjoy or works on that you appreciate.
Yeah, I mean, as a filmmaker, some of my deepest, richest experiences and on the biggest projects include working with Martin Scorsese as an editor, and Thelma Schoonmaker, working on a short film that was nominated for an Oscar that some people consider the best film they ever saw. I did once upon a time work on the battle scene in Waterworld, which was a big undertaking, and I'm still very proud of that. Those are some of my editing experiences.
We were talking about how you use somatic experiencing in your work. When I was interested, how did you get interested in it when you
recently started? Well, to be perfectly honest, I was a client myself. Well, yeah, so was I. Yeah. I mean, which I think gets a lot of people into these fields. I was a client myself, and I'd read some Peter Levine, and I worked with several people, some psychologists, some body workers, some movement people, because in part of somatic experiencing the BAM, I particularly liked the B part, the movement part. I find that very empowering as a resource. I realized, especially in editing, the ability of somatic experiencing to separate experience and slow it down and articulate it was a beautiful thing to offer to my editing class. The thrust of what I try to teach editors, the thrust of good editing, is really to create a somatic experience for the audience. Towards, if an editor cannot experience somatically or has blocks there, how are they going to put that in the work? I was just thinking this, a lot of people may not understand what BAM is, or think that, oh yeah, that sounds simple, all you have to do is just do your instincts, but it's not really that simple, is it? No, it's not. Peter Levine, when he invented somatic experiencing, he basically came up with BAM, which I like because it has the BAM, bam, you know? So it's got a little magic to it. But the BAM stands for sense, image, behavior, affect, meaning. And he's saying that's what experience is made up of, which is a big statement, but I have found those 5 categories to be sufficient to describe experience or full experience. And if you want your movie to be a full experience, I think we can agree it should have sensation, which may be all that a lot of movies have these days. They definitely have image. Behavior would be action, any movement. Affect, you could argue movies today don't have as much affect a lot of time, means emotion. And then it all should add up to a meaning, a personal meaning, preferably, that, you know, hopefully is cathartic or healing in some way, or just useful. So if a movie is supposed to have those things, which I think it should to be a really good movie, the creators need that too. So I would just go over BAM. It's really pretty easy to remember: sense, image, behavior, affect, meaning. And you've been teaching this. I remember learning this in the early 2000s. You went over it. Did I bring it up? Yeah, you did. You absolutely did. And in fact, it took me, because a lot of people may think, oh yeah, that sounds simple. Right. This is almost 20 years later, or 16 years later, and I'm just now getting to the surface of how complicated and how intricate that can be, you know, in terms of putting it into practice.
So that is a little taste of some of the work that we were doing. If you want more information and would like to continue to see the rest of the video, you can see it at, we can provide the link now, and you can also go on to yourdigitalstorytellingproject.com, look under speakers, and it has the whole lecture from USC, as well as www.filmandvideobasedtherapy.com. You can also find out more about the authors from the book. This is an embedded website in the book, and either one will get you in touch with either me or Paul. So if you would like to follow up further about somatic experiencing, I welcome you to come in and take a look at what we have to offer there. This is the companion website for video and filmmaking as psychotherapy I just mentioned, complete with the trailer and, like I said, all kinds of links to show you where this field is headed. So now I'm going to open up the door to questions and answers. If you have any questions, just please send your questions to the chat box.
Okay.
And you're going to be handling that one?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Doctor. That was a great presentation. I'm sure people are going to learn much more from your presentation today. So now we are going to start our question answer round. So this is for all the attendees listening this webinar. If you have any questions to ask to our speaker today, please send in your questions using the chat box. Doctor will wait for some time so that we will receive some questions from the audiences. Okay, we have a question from Kevin. If film is not available, what would be the next best medium?
Virtual reality would definitely be the next medium that I would say is practical in the therapy room. I've seen this work, and I'm going to give some links to show you apps that are approved, that we're working on. The one I mentioned earlier was it's called Relax VR. It was developed by a yoga teacher and programmer, and I've been in communication with him to basically do what Paul and I talked about with film. And Paul and I have used this with people where we show them the virtual reality app, and it loosens them up, and they get relaxed, and then they're open to doing more somatic work like what Peter Levine does. So it's a good introduction, and if you're not able to do film with your clients, this would be a very easy way to kind of get it introduced.
Thank you so much, doctor. Now we will wait for some more minutes because people, I think, are sending questions.
And I do realize there's a lot of information there about, we cover everything from the basis of trauma, how it applies to addictions, a lot of statistical data that was, in my opinion, maybe not so stimulating, but had to be done if we're going to address this to to be used in the VA hospital one day, or to be used with addiction treatment facilities. We have to have that evidence-based background. So it is very important to get that in the book, as well as the ethical component of this, as it's an emerging field.
Okay, so moving on to the next question. We have a question from Marvin. How is these being stored by the clinician or the client?
Well, as I mentioned, and I really didn't go into detail because we are low in time, there's a program called Sukasa that can encrypt files. It does so at the HIPAA compliant level. That video will also be shared at the end. So you can see how that company in Silicon Valley, which is now partnered with Barracuda, it's HIPAA compliant. Nothing is 100%, but I would suggest using that if it certain applications on, let's say you're using a smartphone to do the video, it would actually allow you to put the video, drop it right into a HIPAA compliant folder within your smartphone. So there are ways of doing that I would say, follow the guidelines of the ethics. It's laid out in the book as well. We do not have an answer to all this yet. Nobody does. But I would say that the best way to keep it is store it, keep it safe, and have good informed consents that don't just address it, but also continue to have that dialogue with clients. So, when Lauren and I put the chapter out on ethics, we didn't say we have an answer, but we said it's a challenge, an ethical challenge to the readers to engage in a discussion. So that's what I would invite people to do, is to continue to bring up good questions and address this critically and technically, because it's a dilemma that faces a lot of different fields right now on how to keep information safe.
Thank you so much. Moving on to the next question. We have a question from Beatrice here. In which way video therapy more effective than simple storytelling when it comes to helping people who have been traumatized?
Oh, in which way is it more effective? I think I could be wrong about the fact that if someone is traumatized, it does affect a certain part of the brain. If they're recognized, they feel seen and heard. And that in itself is pretty regulating to the nervous system, just having that recognition. Now, there's a lot of, there are quite a few things that go into why I believe that it's more than just a narrative. It's going to be involving things that address not just the intellectual part of the brain, but the nervous system. So that's why we brought in Paul to talk about how, at a physical level, this is happening in the body. When somebody is making a movie, as in the editing process at least, they're having to kind of feel through things. They're having to check in with their body. And that enables them to have an aesthetic experience that, when you orient to the room and you kind of like feel like you're sitting in a chair, or you notice the sensations around you, you're more likely to calm down. And in that regulation, you're able to say, look, the body is able to kind of access that language portion of the brain. Once you can talk, you can do talk therapy. And that's the whole point, is to get that therapeutic relationship back online so that people can do effective talk therapy. The storytelling is a way of getting people to that point. So that's the really goal of the whole thing, is that talk therapy does a good job. We just need to get them there. This is to help people that would otherwise not be reached.
Okay, thank you so much, doctor. And look like we have reached the end of the question answer round. Okay, so if you have, this is for all the attendees, if you have any more questions, you can send in your questions at webinar@sovhealth.com. I repeat, webinar@sovhealth.com. And if you have any questions related to CE certificate, if you are facing any problem downloading your CE certificate, you can send in your queries at j.lisalda, it's j.lisalda @sovhealth.com. Once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a thank you email within 24 to 48 hours with all the information pertaining to this webinar and how you can earn your CE certificate. In that email, you will also receive instructions on how you can earn your CE certificate. And this presentation will be available to watch after 72 hours on sovinstitute.com. Now I will let you know how you can download your CE certificate, because most of our audience having problem downloading their CE certificate. So now I will tell you what you actually have to do when you will be going to download your CE certificate. First of all, you just need to go on sovinstitute.com. So we have taken a screenshot of the page. So this is the home page of sovinstitute.com, where you can see a short form to enter your login credentials. So here you have to enter your login credentials. Just enter your login credentials and sign up. And if you are not registered yet, you just need to press on the register button, enter your details and just log in there. After logging in to this page, you will land on the next page where you can see lots of presentations. So you need to click on the presentation you want to watch. Just press on the presentation you want to watch and then you will land on the next page. Here you can see the information related to your presentation, like abstract and course objectives, speaker and email address, like that. In this page, you will see a continue to video button at the very right corner. You just need to press continue to video button. After pressing this button, you can watch the video. After watching the video, you again have to press continue to quiz button at the very right bottom. After pressing that button, you will land on the page where you can find the quiz questions. And you just need to answer those quiz questions and then you can just download your CE certificate. It's that simple. For your convenience, I will repeat the whole process very quickly again. You just need to go on sovinstitute.com, enter your login credentials. If you have not yet register yourself and then enter your login credentials. Log in there and then you will land on a page where you can find lots of presentations. Click on the presentation you want to watch. After clicking that, you will land on the page where you can find the details of the presentation, where you can find a link at the very right bottom, continue to video button. After watching the video, just press continue to quiz button and then you can land on the page where you can find the quiz questions. After answering all the questions, you can download your CE certificate right there. I think I made my part clear. And if you still have some questions related to CE certificate and you still have some confusions, you can send in your queries at webinar@sovhealth.com or j.lisalda@sovhealth.com. Okay, so thank you for your participation once again. We hope you found this information valuable. Have a great rest of your week and we'll look forward to bring more interesting webinar each month. So keep joining us and goodbye.